Steven Universe Future gets me every goddamn time. The galaxy has already been saved. The external conflict is gone and the scars are all that remain. The last few episodes read as brutally honest tutorials on how not to process your trauma. Viewing your loved ones as the only stabilizing presence in your life and smothering them with affection in an attempt to solidify the relationship beyond breakability? Yeah, that doesn't work. Finding catharsis in rage and violence and other tenets of toxic masculinity? Yeah, super does not work. Confronting your abuser directly? That can harm you as much as it harms them. And then there is the third to last episode, fittingly titled, Everything's Fine. You've tried every method you know for feeling better and nothing has worked. So, what if you could just pretend you're okay? After all, trauma isn't real in the strictest sense. Trauma lives in the past, in your memories and emotions, not in the physical, in the here and now. It doesn't change the kind of work you should be trying to accomplish in this world, right? We should all be working to help our fellow people, to make the world a more hospitable and just place. So why not just do that?
Did you ever have one of those movies where the first time you see it, you enjoy yourself and maybe you tear up a little bit at the climax, but overall you just chalk it up to a good time and move on with your life, but then something draws you back to it. And then by the 4th or 5th rewatch, you're bawling your eyes out through the entire 3rd act, and then at around the 12th rewatch, some chakra in your brain just kind of busts open, and you feel like you can see everything. And then at around rewatch 26, you start to believe that maybe this movie is the most important thing to ever happen ever? Yeah, me neither. Anyway, today we're discussing Encanto. Encanto is a 2021 animated film about the Madrigals, a magical family living in an enchanted house in a village in Colombia who use their magic powers to help their community. But when our heroine Mirabel, the only member of this family without superpower— why am I telling you this? You've seen this movie! Or if you haven't, you should. It's beautiful, and the rest of this video ain't gonna make a lot of sense. Encanto is a very good movie. I don't think this is a controversial point. It has been a massive critical success, even though it was a box office failure because it was released in theaters in the middle of a goddamn COVID surge, but it's fine, whatever, I'm not still mad about it. And if the online response is anything to go by, its release on Disney Plus resulted in its massive cultural dominance for a while. Literally everyone is talking about Bruno, despite the Madrigal's express wishes that we do not talk about Bruno. We had one job, you guys. But what might be a slightly more saucy hot take is that in my considered opinion, this movie is the best Disney movie since Beauty and the Beast. In terms of pure artistic mastery, in terms of both musical and visual splendor, in terms of the bold and confident story structure, and in terms of cultural significance, this might be Disney's crowning achievement of the 21st century, as well as Lin-Manuel Miranda's. And yes, I am including in that both Hamilton and his actual human children. Fuck the kids, right? Encanto's great and we're gonna talk about it. Part 1. Don't worry, we're gonna get to the pupa. When discussing a Disney movie that showcases the work and stories of a marginalized group, it is always good to start with the caveat that one should always be extremely ambivalent about Disney's attempts to be woke. One can praise the social progress in the films that come out of the studio, while also acknowledging that they are an evil capitalistic juggernaut hydra that is destroying society in general and art in specific. Ba-da-ba-ba! And that truth can coexist with the fact that, like, they made movie good. Talkie picture make leak eyeball water. I've read articles from several Colombian writers who have commented positively about Disney's approach of using a trust, basically a large committee of sensitivity consultants, for this film, as they've done for several of their recent films depicting marginalized groups like Moana or Coco. This approach has limitations, absolutely. Note that 2 of Encanto's 3 directors are white, and none are Colombian. But overall, the consensus seems to be that it has resulted in a respectful and authentic feeling final product, and that if Disney is gonna keep doing the woke thing, then this is probably the way to do it. Of course, the truly woke thing to do would be to dissolve the Disney Corporation altogether, but honestly, that sounds like a lot of work, and My afternoon's pretty slammed. So with that out of the way, let me begin my effusive gushing by addressing a common criticism about the film. Namely, the songs all sound the same as all of Lin-Manuel Miranda's other musicals. And I mean, you're not wrong. We're all pretty familiar with Lin-Manuel as a songwriter at this point, right? We know his quirks, his tics, his sundry idiosyncrasies, and yeah, the gang's all here. We got the song where a character is rapping so fast that it's supposed to be impressive, but it actually just means you can't understand what they're saying.
So I can exceed it. Sister Mariana, you can marry my sister if you want to between you and me. Just kind of a prima donna.
You got the song where everybody sings a verse, and then they all come back in at the end and sing all their different verses together while dancing in a circle, kind of like Tonight from West Side Story, but with a lot more bombastic in-your-face energy. And then, of course, there is my personal favorite, the one where everybody's just having a good time. Consider the coconut. And yeah, I get it. It is perfectly normal to feel a little oversaturated with Lin-Manuel in the year of our Lord, whatever year this is. But from my perspective, the reprisal of all these quirks is forgivable here, because Encanto is the perfect vehicle for his musical style. Miranda's music is loud, electric, manic, and breakneck fast. Animation is simply a much better medium for matching that energy than theater, and even Moana and Vivo are visually sedate in comparison to this. They finally paired him with animators who are willing and able to get crazy with it, and so the things that I found repetitive before all suddenly click. You see Lin phoning it in and repeating his old tricks. I see him engaging in a years-long process of testing and refining his old tricks until they can be used to their fullest potential here. Also, this movie seems to have finally learned its lesson with Lin, which is that you get him to write your music and then you do not let him sing.
Oh, don't make me sing.
Why is everyone making me sing?
No one made you sing!
God, even the particular vocal quirks of his that make it into the music are just a lot less annoying when they're coming out of Stephanie Beatriz.
Let's go.
Let's go! Let's go, let's go!
And on that note, have you ever noticed how Disney movies, for all the inspiration they take from the musical format, always kind of seem to stop being musicals around the third act? Because, like, think about it. Can you name an iconic Disney closing number? Not really, right? During the Renaissance, they just kind of slapped a reprise at the end. And then later on, they didn't even bother with that, so you wind up with weird things like the last song in Tangled being the romantic love ballad, or the last song in Frozen being the rock troll comedy number.
Like his peculiar reindeer.
This thing with the reindeer
That's a little outside of nature's
This is not-
Lin-Manuel Miranda, however, knows his shit inside and out. Not only in regards to different eras of Colombian music, which he clearly did his research on.
It's got its own things. I mean, it's got the importance of the accordion, the tiple, which you do not find typically in other forms of Latin music. The rhythms that are distinct. The vallenato rhythm is different from a Dominican merengue rhythm.
But in regards to the history and language of musicals, of which the Disney canon itself is a significant part. The resultant soundtrack is such a perfect marriage of these three elements, namely Colombian music, Disney, and Broadway, that it actually gives me chills. And can we talk about an iconic closing number? God, this movie slaps. Alright, so now that we've got that out of the way, it's time to talk about trauma, and specifically how the film's message about intergenerational trauma ties into another common criticism, namely, yet another Disney movie without an iconic Disney villain. Give me another one. And look, I love a good campy Disney villain just as much as the next queer person, but narratively speaking, this movie has a villain. It's Abuela. Part 2, fuck you, Abuela! The level of abuse that Abuela Alma inflicts on her family in this movie is comparable to that of the most monstrous Disney villains, i.e. Frollo or Mother Gothel. Let's take stock, shall we? We have subtly undermining Mirabel's confidence with passive-aggressive comments.
I know you want to help, but tonight must go perfectly. So the best way for some of us to help is to step aside. Let the rest of the family do what they do best.
Constantly negging her daughter for not having complete control over a superpower, which is literally based on her emotions.
Peppa, you have a cloud.
I know, Mama, but now I can't find Antonio. What do you want from me?
Dropping subtle yet consistent comments that redirect everyone else's suffering to be about her suffering.
Mama, be nice to Mirabel, okay? You know tonight will be hard for her.
If the gift ceremony doesn't go well this time, tonight will be hard for us all.
Attempting to gaslight Mirabel into thinking she's delusional in front of the entire town, even though we learn later that she believes her about the house. Going so far as to imply that Mirabel is drunk.
There is nothing wrong with La Casa Madrigal. The magic is strong. And so are the drinks.
Seemingly not caring about Isabella's marriage as it pertains to, you know, Isabella, the person who's getting married, but as it pertains to her own legacy.
Such a fine young man with our perfect Isabella will bring a new generation of magical blessings. Such a perfect match.
So perfect.
And so good for the Encanto. The Guzmans and the Madrigals together will be so good for the Encanto.
And then, of course, you have the fact that during the song What Else Can I Do?, Isabella and Mirabel solve the central conflict of the movie. The cracks are healed. The magic is fixed. But because they didn't fix it in exactly the way that she wants, Abuela cannot process that loss of control and blindly stumbles in to fuck the whole thing up. And of course, there are her more overt outbursts, during which we can see body language from nearly all the Madrigals, which clearly demonstrates how afraid they are of her. And that's just the obvious stuff. With subtle emotional abuse like this, the acts themselves often place second fiddle to the behavior that such acts encourage. We see no evidence that Abuela ever explicitly told Luisa that she has to carry the entire Encanto on her shoulders, or that Isabella is required to marry someone that she doesn't want to. But the fact remains that, consciously or not, the power she exerts over her family for decades makes them all feel like their function is to please her. This is most explicitly spelled out with Mirabel's sisters, because, well, they get their own songs, but we see it with everybody to some extent.
Yeah, my gift wasn't helping the family.
Oh god, it stresses me out how Peppa's entire side of the family seems structured around managing Peppa's emotions so as to prevent adverse weather events. In fact, the only one who seems to escape that dynamic unscathed is Dolores. But actually, can we just talk about Dolores for a second? Part 2.5, The Tragedy of Dolores Madrigal. Because, like, her power is that she can hear everything, right?
My cousin Dolores can hear this whole corner's a mile away.
The only one worried about the magic is you. And the rats talking in the walls.
And, okay, cool. I just have one question. What? I'm sorry. Excuse me. How the hell is this gift anything other than an eternal goddamn nightmare? I beg you to just think about this for like 2 seconds. Can you imagine being able to hear everything, everywhere, all at once, all of the time? It is a wonder, nay, a marvel, nay, a miracle unto itself that Dolores appears to be only moderately frazzled from moment to moment. She should be a muttering, incoherent wreck 24/7. Casita! Why would you do this to my girl Dolores? What the fuck did she ever do to you? She has heard, nay been forced to hear, the orgasm noises of everyone in that village hundreds if not thousands of times each. People talk about Bruno like he's an unstable eldritch horror, but give Dolores a few more years, she'll need a goddamn straitjacket. We never see inside Dolores' room, but I just like to imagine that she's gone like full voiceover studio in there, like it's just this magical maze full of sound insulation paneling that you could just get lost in forever. And like, what purpose does it serve? What practical application does it have? Every other superpower is badass as hell, and I understand immediately upon its introduction how it helps the community. You got healing people with food, making flowers and plants bloom, super strength to move stuff around, communicating with and commanding animals, shape-shifting to entertain the kids. Those are all great. The only other comparably useless power that seems to be more of a hindrance than a help is Peppa's. But at the very least, we do get this this brief shot of her in the fields where crops grow, so we can assume that her weather powers are useful for food supply purposes. I love the idea that Peppa's job is to just go down to the fields every morning and just think about things that make her upset so she gets all worked up and annoyed so it rains. I should have that job. I'd be great at it. But the only thing that Dolores' gift would accomplish would be to make everybody in the Encanto constantly paranoid and afraid that anything they say could be just shared widely without their... Oh, holy shit. Okay, yeah, that's why.
Dolores, do we have a date?
Tonight. He wants 5 babies.
Abuela needs somebody to monitor the population of the Encanto so that nobody steps out of line. Dolores Madrigal is the surveillance state. Send tweet! When you examine abusive parental figures in Disney movies, an interesting dichotomy begins to emerge. In her excellent video essay, The Complex Feels of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Lindsay Ellis distinguishes between abusers whose complicated legacy must be grappled with, like Yondu, and abusers with whom bridging the gap is impossible, like Thanos. Now, in real life, this choice is an entirely personal one, and it exists more as a spectrum than a binary. How much you want to forgive or even interact with the abusive figures in your life is entirely up to you. But in a narrative, well, that choice kind of depends on what you're trying to do with the narrative. Characters like Mother Gothel, Frollo, and Thanos adopt real-life abusive behaviors, mostly so the writers can give their over-the-top villainy some much-needed verisimilitude. For all the things I love about Ursula, for instance, she's not super relatable. I've never had to deal with her brand of villainy. This is the same reason that in the Harry Potter series, Dolores Umbridge is framed as a much easier character to hate than Voldemort, despite Voldemort being a genocidal fascist dictator. Voldemort is the type of villain you hear about on the news. Umbridge is the type of villain who works at your school. Abusive characters like Abuela Alma, however, exist for the purpose of humanization, which is not the same thing as verisimilitude. Abuse does not spontaneously spring into existence through pure malice. Abuse is inherited and passed on. And in minority communities, it often tends to manifest itself through generational trauma. Let's discuss. But before we do so, let us briefly take stock of the number of times in this movie that Mirabel absolutely should have ground the action to a screeching halt in order to clean her glasses for 30 seconds.
Literally, the only thing you...
Salt. Sugar?
Oh, sweetie, listen to me. You want a non-alcoholic lens cleaning spray, or failing that, dish soap and lukewarm water on both sides of each lens, and then you want to wipe it dry with a microfiber cloth. Do not use your shirt. You are just scraping those protective coatings right off the lens. Part 3, the Encanto's a Friggin Pupa. I don't know why the Boston accent is there, I just know that it's correct. Sometimes I have no more control over this show than you do. So if you watched this movie and you have eyes, you probably noticed the visual motif of the butterfly throughout. The house has butterflies, Mirabel's dress has butterflies, the candle has butterflies, the climax has butterflies, this whole damn courtroom has butterflies, the vending machine in the lobby has butterflies. And you're probably at least somewhat aware that the butterflies are a reference to the work of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, or that they symbolize transformation and rebirth and freedom. But I would like to argue that this metaphor is a lot more literal upon second glance, and furthermore that upon third glance, there is another, even meatier metaphor underneath. Because you remember this line from Bruno?
Oh, well, because... You know, the mountains around the Encanto are pretty tall, and,
Yeah, it wasn't just that he didn't want to leave. He literally could not escape. When Abuela Alma created the Encanto and those mountains sprang out of the ground, she literally cut herself and her community off from the rest of the world. No one can come in or out. And because the environment responds to its matriarch's emotional state, everyone inside is essentially held hostage by her trauma. And hang on, this sounds kind of familiar. WandaVision! Like Wanda from WandaVision, what begins as a perfectly understandable trauma response slowly mutates into cruel and abusive behavior. But unlike Wanda, what we're looking at here ain't no hexagonal energy bubble full of sitcom nostalgia. What we got here is a friggin' pupa. 'Cause look, we all love this song, right?
Dos oruguitas enamoradas.
pasan sus noches y madrugadas.
It's gorgeous, and the beautiful Spanish lyrics about two caterpillars in love who must go their separate ways breaks my friggin' heart every time. It all ties in masterfully with the butterfly motif, but what most analyses of this film miss is an examination of the interstitial middle between these two states. Caterpillars don't just morph into butterflies willy-nilly and higgledy-piggledy. You gotta have that pupa. When I first watched Dos Oruguitas, I was incredibly moved by it, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. We're essentially presented with no new information. We know everything that happened to Abuelo Pedro from Alma's story in the prologue. Scary dudes on horses, Pedro and Alma are forced to flee along with their fellow villagers, Pedro dies holding off their pursuers. The difference between the film's opening and climax is entirely in the framing. The prologue is presented as a Disney fairy tale complete with poetical narration. Look at the way Alma picturesquely reaches for Pedro like she's on stage. And now look at the same scene recreated in the climax. The facts, the clinical realities of the situation are the same, but the disparity in the emotional truth of each scene couldn't be more stark. Yeah, turns out that watching your husband get murdered in front of you fucking sucks. That shit isn't fun. It's not beautiful, and it's not graceful. It did not have to happen this way in order for beauty to flourish or whatever. It is raw and unpleasant and gutting. She does not picturesquely fall to the ground. We see her collapse and wail in a way that is distinctly not a fairy tale. And I can't fucking handle this scene right here with Abuela sitting in front of her bed with her 3 babies, and unlike in the opening fairy tale where she immediately just kind of looks at the house and smiles and goes about her day, you can tell from her expression and body language here that this is the moment that Abuela shut down. And look at her face as she gets up and walks down the hallway into the montage of the doors. That is her stuffing down her trauma because it's the only way she can fathom continuing. Abuela Alma cannot bear to be a caterpillar anymore. And so she weaves herself this protective pupa. She makes a life for herself inside it, and by all appearances, it's a pretty happy one. Unlike Wanda, she indulges in a very Steven Universe-like impulse to build the type of community where the suffering she endured will never have to happen to anyone else, indulging in the understandable desire to wrestle her trauma into something positive without staring too deeply into its face.
Here at Little Homeschool, you have a chance to rediscover yourself and learn to live on Earth if you like.
We swear to always help those around us and earn the miracle that somehow found us.
God, the words earn and somehow in that lyric always break my heart a little bit. Abuela's self-worth has taken such a hit that she can't accept that Pedro gave her this gift simply because he loved her. She feels like she has to earn it, and she forces her family not only into that practice, but into that mindset.
Make your family proud.
The point is that, as Mirabel points out at the movie's climax, the pupa that Abuela constructs to keep everyone safe is in many ways an overwhelmingly positive force. But a pupa, though strong, is not impenetrable, and when cracks inevitably start to appear, that shit's scary. A common symptom of trauma, and this is something I can speak to directly, is a desire to exert power over others as a way of creating a feeling of ersatz agency over your own life. When somebody is passive-aggressive or a control freak, that usually means they've been traumatized earlier in their life by a situation where they felt like they had no control. And if this impulse is left unchecked, you will spend your whole life violently painting over your brittle facade of okayness.
Everything is fine. There is nothing wrong with La Casa Madrigal. The magic is strong. The magic is strong. We are the Madrigals.
Fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine.
Just saying it all those extra times make it happen?
This entire movie consists of a single, slow stripping back of that facade as every Madrigal's insecurities are laid bare. And that process, it's not graceful. Did you know that caterpillars' bodies have to dissolve completely into goo inside the pupa before they can start growing into butterflies? Yeah, that's gross. Insects are gross. Nothing smaller than a mouse should exist. When you build the many complex systems of your life on a foundation of coping mechanisms, those structures do not take kindly to being uprooted. But uproot them you must, because if you don't, someone or something else will uproot them for you. Abuela, this should not have happened to you. It is not your fault, and it is an injustice you should not have had to weather. But it happened, and we have to move forward and heal from it regardless. So what do you do? Well, as often happens with both humans and caterpillars, sometimes your life just has to completely collapse into a gross goo in order for things to get bad enough to seek help, which in this case consists of the entire plot of the movie. After a solid hour of Abuela fiercely resisting Mirabel's heroic attempts to save the family, that shit finally comes to a head. The house, representing the edifice of the Madrigals, the strength of this safe haven they've created, collapses under the strain. And when the house breaks, the Encanto itself breaks. You see how this mountain crumbles in the distance in this shot? It's a real blink and you'll miss it moment. But if you look closely, you'll see that when Mirabel runs away in the next scene, she is running through the crack in that very same mountain. When Abuela says, "I've never been able to come back here of the river where Pedro died," she doesn't just mean emotionally. She literally, physically could not come back here. Although, if we are following this metaphor to its meaty center, those are the same thing. Her aversion to examining her trauma affected the magic so deeply that literally nobody, not even her, could access the true unedited memory of her pain. But now, because the pupa has been shattered so completely, she can finally step outside. You'll notice that all throughout Dos Oruguitas, Alma and Pedro are referred to as the two caterpillars until there's a break for dialogue just before the final verse. Alma and Mirabel finally talk to each other as equals, the trauma laid bare, the arduous process of healing finally begun, and it is only then that the unseen singer of the song, who I have always read as Abuelo Pedro speaking from beyond the grave, chimes back in with "Ay mariposas." The Madrigals may have had butterflies sewn into their clothing this whole time, but it is not until this moment, when the protective pupa has broken, that they truly become butterflies. And here's the thing, on my initial viewing of Encanto, I was a tad disappointed when the Madrigals got their magic back at the end of the film. 'Cause I loved that they had to rebuild their house using their own hands, that they weren't stuck relying on the magic and its associated pressures anymore. And I loved that the townspeople helped them out as thanks for all the help and kindness the Madrigals had shown them over the years. And it's fine, I'm not crying, you're crying! But you know what? I've thought about it, and I like it now. Note that while the house is restored to its former glory, the mountains hemming the people in are not reinstated. Does this leave the Encanto more vulnerable? Perhaps, but that's kind of an inherent part of healing. A pupa is limiting, but it's also safe. Opening it up is nerve-wracking precisely because it's dangerous. But if done right, it's also a way to be more resilient to that kind of attack. I have anxiety that makes me constantly police my own behavior and be insanely aware and critical of what other people might think of me. My brain is just constantly throwing scenarios at me where everyone from loved ones to complete strangers is constantly judging me for every single little thing that I do, and I have to come up with contingencies for every single possible scenario, or else I'm a failure. And while it has taken a lot of therapy for me to wrangle this impulse into something manageable, I also think it makes me a better writer. It means I write empathetically, always thinking about how my words would feel to a reader. And it makes me very intent about how my arguments thread together and what a person who disagrees with me would be thinking while reading. But when I am repressed and angry because I haven't dealt with my trauma, those positive aspects are only going to help me so much. Turns out, being a good writer isn't worth shit if you're a petty, passive-aggressive asshole. I mean, some people have managed to make it work, but from what I understand, you already have to have some pull in Hollywood. The point is that while it is quite untrue that suffering is necessary to create beauty, and in fact that belief can be very harmful, it's also useless to discount the fact that occasionally beauty can come from suffering, if only because beauty can come from anywhere. The process of breaking open the pupa, whether it's achieved through years of therapy or just living through the events of a Disney movie, is the essential tool for ensuring that you are not ruled by the allure of that beauty, but instead are able to wield it as a tool. You get the magic back when you understand the magic. Part 4, A Fiddler on the Roof. Sounds crazy, no? But here in our little village of Anatevka, you might say that every one of us is a fiddler on the roof, trying to scratch out a simple tune without breaking his neck. Now, I know you're all waiting for me to connect this back to Steven Universe, and I promise we're getting there. But honestly, the character in the movie musical canon that Abuela reminds me of the most is not our boy Steve, but Evan Hansen! I'm kidding, I mean Tevye from Fiddler. Tevye and Abuela Alma are both heads of their respective families. Both have suffered trauma inflicted on them by the outside world. Both are from marginalized communities, and thus, they are in many ways correct to be wary of the outside world. The outside world fucking sucks. Both begin their stories living peacefully in a small community that they perceive as a protective shell. And both are forced by people they love to face disruptions to the status quo for the sake of their family's happiness and well-being. And neither of them can fucking handle it. Because the status quo is what protects us, right? Our existence as free people in this world is hanging by a fucking thread. And the status quo is the only thing keeping us from dropping right into the inferno.
And each new generation must keep the miracle burning.
Without our traditions, our lives would be as shaky as a fiddler on the roof.
Both Tevye and Alma equate destructive change from the outside world with any kind of change, and so they are unable to see positive change when it's standing right in front of them. And the ultimate tragedy of Fiddler on the Roof, the horrifying fate that Abuela ultimately avoids, is that in the end, the change proves too much for Tevye. He can't handle the new world that Chava tries to show him. It is literally easier for him to cut his daughter off forever than to accept her for who she is, which is a pretty gay plot point when you think about it. Tevye will bring that trauma with him to America and continue to inflict it on his family as they try to adjust to their new lives. Will he ever reconcile with Chava? There's no way to know. Regardless, Chava's subplot in Act 2 of Fiddler is very much a plea for acceptance, in the same way that Mirabel just wants Abuela to see her. And in the end, Mirabel gets what Chava wanted, but never got.
Papa, I beg you to accept us.
If I try and bend that far, I'll break.
I asked my Pedro for help. Mirabel. He sent me you.
'Cause, you know, isn't that what we all really want in the end? To be seen? Nothing more, nothing less, to be just accepted for who we are, warts and all. Point being, I think the thing that hit me so hard about Encanto is that it feels like a version of Fiddler where the tragedy is avoided through growth and change and love. It's a story where Orpheus and Eurydice just barely make it out of the underworld, where Romeo intercepts Friar Lawrence's letter at the last minute. This is why I disagree with another common critique of the film that goes like, "Oh, wow, Abuela kinda got off easy at the end there, didn't she?" And like, yes, sure, normally you can't fix decades of dysfunction with a single heartfelt conversation by a lake and a shit ton of magical butterflies. And it's understandable that viewers who don't expect to ever be able to reconcile with their abusive parental figures might find this quick turnaround unsettling, or naive, or saccharine. Personally, this choice doesn't bother me because I read it as just a beautiful bit of fairy tale wish fulfillment. Like, wow, you know, wouldn't it be nice if the abusive people in our lives not only realized their mistakes and not only made a genuine apology, but actually took the steps to make things right? Well, you know, if you wish upon a star, that dream might just come true. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba! Part 5. So why didn't Mirabel get a gift? Because that really is the one lingering question that Encanto leaves us with. We never get a direct answer in the text. Some fans online have speculated that Casita knew that Mirabel had to go through that pain in order to make the plot of the movie happen. But I don't love that interpretation, mostly because I don't love the trope of an omniscient character secretly manipulating events behind the scenes. It always feels like a bit of a cop-out about, plus I don't think Casita would do my girl dirty like that. Instead, let's ask another relevant question. What's Abuela's gift? She doesn't have one. We never see her wield any magic of her own. So, why is that? Well, the Madrigals are basically royalty, right? The Madrigals literally have magic powers divinely bestowed on them by a perfect Christ-like paragon/cool dude who sacrifices his own life to save his people. On top of that, from what we see, they kind of seem to be the de facto leaders of the town. People rely on them for help and protection, certainly, but also everyone looks up to them, is invested in their fates, and never really questions their place in the social order. And the magic is given through the bloodline, hence why Abuela seems creepily obsessed with her family's ability to breathe. They're the monarchy, albeit a sanitized, fictionalized, Disneyfied version of the monarchy that is at this point more mimetic than political. Point being that by extension, Mirabel is a Disney princess.
If you wear a dress and you have an animal sidekick, you're a princess.
Twitter!
And this, of course, makes Abuela Alma the queen. But unlike some Disney queens I could name, she asserts her power not through magic, but through authority. We never see Abuela displaying any magical abilities, but we do see her leading the household and inspiring others. Her gift is to be a steward for the magic, the leader of the family, of the house, of the community. And that's Mirabel's gift too. Abuela Alma isn't gonna live forever, and the house knows this. At some point, the house is gonna have to pick a rightful heir. And who better than Mirabel? Look at the way Mirabel interacts with Casita. Everybody loves the house, of course, but Mirabel is far and away the character we see affectionately interacting with it the most. Abuela comes close, but we mostly see her ordering the house around. The opening number literally starts with her cueing the house, as if to immediately hammer in how in sync they are. And Mirabel spends the entire movie proving how worthy she is to be the next steward of the magic. Like Abuela, she cares deeply about the family, but unlike Abuela, that care is demonstrably not rooted in her own ego. This is shown most potently through her relationship with Antonio. Mirabel and Antonio have a closeness that surpasses most relationships in the movie, and we mostly witness it at a stage before Antonio has the gift, when the pressure is fast approaching, but not here yet. Mirabel's kindness and understanding, in contrast to Abuela's coldness and fear, are the reasons Antonio is brave enough to take on his new gift. Mirabel consistently chooses to maintain the family and not the magic. And also, Antonio is my son, and I would both kill and die for him. The house wasn't like holding out on Mirabel, it was trying to give her her gift. But as we all know, the house responds to the family's emotional state. And Abuela, as head of the family, simply was not able to surrender that control to Mirabel. So the whole thing short-circuited. And because the whole family attempted to maintain the status quo despite this incident, the house could only give Mirabel her gift the way it knew how, by supporting her, loving her, and interacting with her in whatever way it could. Part 6, conclusion. So, Steven Universe Future, WandaVision, Encanto, has it struck you we've been getting a lot of pop culture recently about how to deal with your trauma? Could it mayhaps be because we're all traumatized? Methinks it mayhaps be. One thing I've neglected to talk about so far is, well, Colombians, you know, the group actually being portrayed in this movie. While I am super not qualified to discuss this at length, I don't want to discount the fact that the trauma Abuela and the Madrigals face in Encanto is very much specific to Colombia, despite its wider applicability that gives the movie such mass appeal. Many Colombian writers have discussed the way this film portrays the omnipresent violence, often referred to simply as the violence, that has plagued the country ever since colonization. Most US media about Colombia tends to focus on the suffering, the dark and gritty and edgy stuff, and so a key part of this conversation has been how gratifying it is to see a mainstream animated blockbuster that embraces the joy and color and energy that is also an indelible part of Colombian culture. A film that acknowledges the suffering, but also refuses to give it a face, and says something substantive about healing from it. Now, this perspective makes Encanto a particularly fascinating contrast to Steven Universe. For those unfamiliar, Steven Universe is a Cartoon Network show consisting of 6 seasons and a movie that tells the story of a young half-human, half-alien boy who spends his time saving the world from monsters, learning lessons about and with his alien parents, and slowly uncovering that he is the descendant of colonizing war criminals whose plans to subjugate the Earth were thwarted thousands of years ago. Despite this, however, as Steven grows up into a young man, he finds himself answering for and dealing with the repercussions of crimes committed millennia before his conception. Are these problems truly his responsibility? I mean, kinda? Even though he didn't do any of that stuff, Steven still lives in the world spawned through those actions. He benefits from the power his ancestry grants him, even though that power gives him just as much grief as it does joy. Steven Universe, as well as its follow-up sequel series, Steven Universe Future, is an Encanto story told from the perspective of the colonizers. But here's the thing. Steven's just as fucking traumatized. Yes, the crimes of his ancestors do give him a duty to forge a better world for everyone today. But the myriad dysfunctions of his childhood have given him the mistaken impression that he needs to shoulder those burdens alone, and this wreaks untold havoc on his psyche, to the point that the only way for him to resolve this trauma is to have a full mental breakdown and briefly turn into a kaiju. Now, I want to be clear here. Am I saying that the psychological damage wrought on the colonizer versus the colonized is equivalent? No! Getting colonized is objectively worse. I think we can all agree. What I am saying is that I feel like none of us are doing too hot right now. And so in recent years, I've found within myself a particular soft spot for media in which the main character's moment of triumph comes primarily from the mere act of acknowledging that shit is fucked. You don't have to pretend that everything is fine. You don't have to shoulder every burden alone for fear of alienating those who love you. Nor do you have to immediately wrestle every negative experience into a positive impulse. It's okay to feel bad. In fact, it is essential to feel bad. Because if you don't, the bad feelings will fester and congeal and hide from your sight, biding their time until the right moment to strike. The only way to get out of this is together, and the only way we do that is being kind to each other, and the only way to do that is to deal with your shit. Get your shit together. Go to therapy and subscribe to my fucking Patreon.
It all became so lovely, those bluest skies above me, those funny feelings I had never felt before I met you. I thought I'd stay a while, I'd try to learn to smile. So many colors I had never even known. Maybe I'll find myself sitting on that distant shore. Maybe I'm not alone. Then I see the colors fading, gentleness of light escaping, shadows of my fear invading. Have I seen this all before? I know that there's something residing, a terror deep inside me. I couldn't understand how you could be so bold. Maybe I'll find myself smiling on that distant shore. Maybe I'm not alone.
Is it?
I noticed.